Good morning and welcome to our UBC Learning Circle, Opening the Knowledge Gates, RavenSong with Alissa Assu. Today's conversation is presented in partnership with the Center for Excellence in Indigenous Health. We'd like to thank the First Nations Health Authority for generously funding the UBC Learning Circle and allowing us to have these conversations. Before we formally begin, I'd like to acknowledge with respect and gratitude that I'm joining you from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat box. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Thrain Squawkin. I'm Syilx Okanagan on my mother's side and Hickory Apache and Belgian on my father's side. I'll be your moderator for today's session, and joining us today, working behind the scenes, is Cynthia, our production coordinator, and our program assistant, Kira. They'll be in the background interacting with everyone in the chat. Finally, before we get into today's discussion, I'll provide a gentle heads up that the topics covered may be sensitive or emotionally triggering. Please make sure that you're looking after yourself, and if at any point in time you need to talk to an elder, friend, or counselor, please don't hesitate to do so. Now I'll turn it over to Alissa to introduce herself.
Hello, Hadi Denise Skyze Sakotse Hadit Sootsin. My name is Alissa Assu. Traditionally, I was raised by my grandmother and my grandpa. So on my maternal side, I am Wet'suwet'en and also Nishka that I don't often share that often. Just because in the North we follow our matriarchs. And so for most of my life, I've identified as Wet'suwet'en. And a part of the conversation today will be including, opening the knowledge gates and also opening about our ancestry. And on my father's side, interestingly enough, I am also a second generation immigrant. My dad traveled from Vietnam into Canada. So it's very strange sometimes to be both First Peoples of the land and then also a newcomer and my family's a newcomer into Canada. So thank you to UBC Learning Circle for having me. Certainly this isn't my first time, but this is definitely one of my most exciting times being here. And we are going to be cutting to the slides. As some of you may know, I am a multi-business owner. I am the founder of West Coast Wildflowers, which really stemmed in believing that Indigenous women and entrepreneurs really deserve to be in competitive retail spaces, and that we didn't need to compete for those spaces, that we just certainly deserve to be on there. And a year and a half ago, an elder came into my store and said, "Ali, you really need to purchase this business that this Indigenous family is closing because they just simply couldn't make it during COVID." And I've always had a calling to medicine. Growing up on the Yinta, on the land, and harvesting nawis, which is soap berries, with my grandmother and my aunties, and the late elder Lucy Namox, or our current matriarch of our community, Mabel Forsyth, in Wet'suwet'en territory. And then later in life, I became diagnosed with stage 4 renal failure, which meant that my kidneys were failing, and that it meant changing my relationship with Indigenous medicine. And so most people, when you're sick, you think of making nettle and devil's club, and you think of marshmallow root tea, you think of Labrador tea to keep us healthy. But I actually am not allowed to have many of those, because the point of my immune system is to keep it compromised and to keep it low. And of course, our medicine increases and boosts our immune system. For years and years, I kind of pivoted away from medicine, and I felt like I was becoming more and more disconnected with our community. And feel free to for the next slide to be shown. And this is about us. This is about Bare essential oils. And I really felt that my journey kind of coming back to Bare really meant coming back to my culture. It really meant coming back to medicine and a way for me to connect with medicine and learn about medicine, but in a safe way for me, for, Indigenous people in our community who have heart transplants, lung transplants, kidney transplants. While we may be a small population, we also deserve and need that cultural component of learning medicine. Next slide, please. And so that became the journey of Bare essential oils. And it was really a steep learning curve of, we really wanted to have our language on the bottles, but unfortunately stuff like that is not eligible for, compliance for Health Canada. So it's on top of trying to connect with medicine and kind of ways of being, our ancestral ways of being, I also had to navigate this colonial system of how can I practice what I want to learn. And kind of embracing our Indigenous heritage and our rituals, and the generation past. Next slide, please. And where I struggle, and I think where a lot of people struggle, um, is finding a mentor, is is finding an elder, finding an auntie, finding someone in the community, whether it's rural or especially for our urban Indigenous people, grateful for places and people at the UBC Learning Circle. Next slide, please. But that it can be difficult. And that for me, I felt like for 10 years, I was trying to search for that mentor, search for that elder. And I felt like I was coming up against a roadblock and that there was gatekeepers in our community. And it was something that I never grew up with, but coming and learning. And it took me until my 30s of understanding that, of course, the trauma in our communities and the reason for gatekeeping, but I truly believe, and working with my business partner, the founder of RavenSong, is that we cannot afford, we truly can't afford to not be sharing the knowledge. And the best analogy that I can give to people in our community is our languages can't survive if only one person in our community is learning language. Master carvers do not become master carvers overnight. That we need many apprentices for food, fishing, the same thing. And so kind of coming back to medicine and cultural teachings is there is just so much gatekeeping. And I think the sacredity of, if I don't want to share this with anyone, but my encouragement is to go find that elder, and if you know knowledge yourself, to go share that, to go share your resources and where to plant, and where to harvest, and always following the general rule of thumb, making sure. Are you giving your patches enough break when harvesting? Some of the simple things that I've learned, I'm like, we have to share this, because long term, we need that medicine to be there. And, are you offering something, for the medicine that you're picking, whether it's tobacco, whether it's seeds, whether are you having an opportunity to give, your hair? Is it a song? Is it something that we can give back? And so speaking of land, I didn't want to share at the very beginning because I really wanted to share this photo. And I really wanted to acknowledge that I'm so blessed that my husband and I get to live on his territory and the Likwita people and the Wewakai, Wewakam, and the Kwiwa First Nations here in Campbell River. And so all of our medicine is hand harvested here on Vancouver Island. Next slide, please. And so what is Bare Essential Oils and how does it relate to RavenSong? So Bare Essential Oils, we are a specialized Indigenous essential oil company that focuses on organic, ethical, and wildcrafted. The ethical and wildcrafted, of course, clean beauty, natural beauty, those are very big buzzwords in our community: zero waste, low waste. But for us, what ethical meant is if we are working with farmers, if we are paying people in our community, our harvesters for our medicine, that we make sure that we're infusing our Indigenous teachings into that. And a part of that is those who are joining us in harvesting, are they being paid fairly? Are they being acknowledged fairly? Are they, are we making sure that we're teaching them how to harvest in an ethical way? And some of that means only taking 20% of the patch of the medicine on the land, and rotating and making sure that there's enough for others. The wild crafted part of our business is, we don't pay online. Certainly you can, but we don't pay for bulk medicine to be shipped to our doorstep. It really means connecting back with the land and kind of opening our lungs up, and really planting our feet and our body and our spirit and our mind in the medicine, because it's very easy to order something online. And this is about, the knowledge that I'm learning with Valerie, and other medicine teachers such as Robin Edgar, Lee at Squalin, Botanicals, so many incredible medicine teachers, plant medicine teachers out there. But that before you get to that point, if you need to scale, is understanding that you yourself, you need to touch that plant, you need to smell the plant, you need to really build a relationship with that medicine first and foremost. And that's something I highly recommend for anyone that is going into plant medicine or wanting to harvest or learning. Next slide, please. So what was really important to RavenSong and Bear, and a lot of people don't know this, but it was really important for us to be able to identify plant medicines that are local and Indigenous to, and I mean Indigenous to like our lands here in British Columbia. And so we've been really lucky to be able to steam distill Grand Fir, BC lavender, and of course, like one of our most sacred medicines, Western red cedar. Next slide, please. And a part of that, the importance of that was for us to be able to continue telling stories through everything. When we're not just selling a bottle of Western red cedar, but that we are also sharing the stories of and using every single part of the Western red cedar, that we make baskets. We continue to make baskets today, our a lot of family heirlooms come from Western red cedar. And so it was really important for us to kind of separate ourselves from the industry. And some people, the number one question that we get asked at Bare Essential Oils and RavenSong Soap and Candle is, why can't you get all of your medicine here? And just like spices around the world, just like helichrysum, which is if you go and look in your medicine cabinet and you look at your skincare products, that plant medicine and soil integrity is just not possible to be planted here in BC. community. So of course we work with direct farmers, and our preference is to have a multi-generational farm that we are working with, because as we build Bare Essential Oils and we continue the knowledge transfer and opening the knowledge gates, Bare Essential Oils is not meant to just be something for my family. It's not something that we're building up for, the Assu family, myself, and my husband Cody Assu, who's a co-owner. Next slide, please. It really is meant for us to create a generational knowledge transfer to the next Indigenous family that will be taking over, but also a generational wealth for our community. And I don't mean wealth in, next slide, please. And I don't mean wealth in financial wealth. We mean the possibility of doing slow living, doing what our ancestors did, being able to practice the calm, and sharing that our bodies are so used to being in this highly stimulus environment with cell phones and TikTok and Instagram. There's just so much out there that we want to create and continue creating the space for Indigenous people, the Indigenous youth that work for us, and the next generation of Indigenous, women or men that work with us, in that this is the space, this can be your safe space. And it's, coming back to the land and coming back to what our people traditionally did. And so you'll notice a part of our, decolonizing our business, and just, again, bringing language back into our business, and, opening, again, that knowledge gate. It also includes language. And so for us, Wadi, is one of our product names. And it was important for us to be very intentional in which products got which name, and does that story make sense for that formulation that we are creating. And would our aunties be proud of us for creating this? So next slide, please. So these ones the slides can be very quick after 5 seconds. But a part of the teachings that we do for a lot of our Indigenous students is learning the different categories of medicine, and what's citrusy and what's woodsy, and what's a herbal plant medicine. Feel free to kind of skip through a couple of these slides here. What's kind of floral. So as I think the intimidating part, that I personally find intimidating, is the scientific names behind our plant medicines, right? We may know Devil's Club, we may know nettle as something, but that there is a science, that our ancestors were scientists back in the day when they were doing plant medicine. And I feel like that often gets missed in teachings and in conversations. And so I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that, and to share that, and to remind those who are on this presentation, or those who listen at a future date, that being a part of this is a science. It really is like getting a degree in university, and that your value and worth can be this. It can be contributing and relearning your plant medicine. And that's the journey that I am at right now, is not only acknowledging I get to rebuild a relationship with this. And, a second part of this, next slide, please, is reminding our Indigenous youth and our Indigenous moms and, people in our community, you are never too late you are never too old to learn your medicines. You're never too late to learn your language, learn the dances. And I know a part of the knowledge and learning with me is this immense pressure of, do I feel Indigenous enough? Even though I grew up on the reserve, even though, my like all of, whether it's, the all-native basketball tournament or lacrosse or things that are very rich in our culture, the Easter soccer tournament that happens every year in Victoria for Indigenous people. And something that I'm really encouraging our Indigenous youth and our students that work with us is that your way to contribute back to, this knowledge transfer amongst community is everyone needs a role. And that role may be just medicine for you, that your calling may be drumming, that it may be an artist. And so that is, something I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge. Next slide, please. Um, so again, it was very important for us. Yinta, as many of you guys know, my community is going through quite duress as a pipeline is being built through the Wet'suwet'en territory, and that my community has been in the news quite often over the last 6 years. And, a part of the medicine, the cardamom and the cypress that went into this was really that we still continue to use our land today, that we still continue to access the medicines that is being offered to us, and that, we are taking it away traditionally and trying to modernize it, right? Unfortunately, we can't historically live in the old times, but we need to find a way in our communities to be able to be in this time, but also kind of, intertwine or weave our old ways into making it functional for us, that we can continue to be the stewards of our lands and, our inherent rights to be on the land. Next slide, please. So, we have kind of a ceremony collection, and it's grounding and uplifting, cooling and warming. And the reason for that, is especially in the students that we work with and the seasons that we go through, we really wanted to remind the storytelling and, our communities that just like we are harvesting food fish, we're harvesting berries, we're harvesting something different, in the winter, or, some communities are doing pemmican, some communities are doing politically it's not correct, but we growing up with my grandmother and my great grandmother, we called it Indian ice cream. But now we call it soapberry ice cream. That everything has a stage and in a moment. And we wanted our ceremony collection to really remind that, that the grounding formulation and everything that we harvest for this is meant to remind us that we're not really meant to be busy in the winter, right? That's when most potlatches, feasting, ways to warm each other. Next slide, please. So this one is a really special one for me. Gikwa is the middle name of my son. And it is also meant for a word for river in our community. And it was important for us to create something that was water-based, that represented our community and our stories, because we come from the Bulkley Valley people, all of these, we wanted to remind our people, such as the name change that happened in our community, and that's happening all over British Columbia. We were formerly known as Morristown. And, apologies, this may be trigger warning, but that was, of course, the priest that came into our community, and that is how Morristown became its name. And we've been, decolonizing and reclaiming our language and our land back, and we are now known as Whitsett. So if anyone has traveled the Northern BC Highway and you've passed Smithers, you're on your way to Hazelton, you'll find us nestled in the middle of there. Next slide. So For me, again, I had talked about Nowis, and I think a part of not just creating products, but a part of it is for the next generation that takes over is really remembering their childhood um, memories of like what, what really brought you joy, what really was, memorable if you were fortunate enough to have a relationship with your grandparents and elders. Um, and for us, we wanted, for people to be reminded of kind of those uplifting moments, and the storytelling that we offer that, that we hope that that scent resonates that for you. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the most exciting part, I would say, of my presentation. So, um, my husband, he's a co-owner. He's also a fourth generation Indigenous Haida Kokakewak commercial fisherman. He runs a boat called the Haida Girl. And, a part of our excitement of purchasing RavenSong was a lot of our joy and a lot of our connection to culture, without dancing and singing and weaving and beading and, everything else that, fits into our community was on the water. I grew up on the water in northern BC. He grew up on the water. Our kids are now growing up on the water. And our water is abundant with, so much medicine. And a part of that is, our seaweed bar and not just that it's good in collagen and not that it's just good in vitamins or, detoxifying properties, but that it is something that is abundant, that is healthy for us to harvest, that we're not taking away from the land. So this is RavenSong Soap and Candle. This is our herbal Indigenous collection. This is the collection that I referenced, that everything is hand harvested. And all of our soaps take 3 to 4 weeks to cure. So not only are we hand harvesting and then drying it and creating an infusion, and then the infusion goes in the soap, right? It's a process. It's a process that we don't rush. It's a process that I think is a great analogy for those who are wanting to learn about medicine and finding someone to, become a mentor or do a knowledge transfer with a medicine teacher in your community, is that everything takes time. And unfortunately, with our society, we can download an app in an instant. We can download an app and scan the app, and it will tell us what plant medicine that is. And just, a big reminder to our community, a big reminder to anyone who is like new in like plant medicine learning, is that we have to respect that time. Our elders, our medicine teachers didn't become who they are overnight. That it has taken years, and not to be discouraged, in the first couple weeks or the first couple months. That the more that you touch the plant medicines, the more that you smell them, that you learn which ones are edible. Are you really building that deep relationship? Next slide, please. Um, so a part of our Indigenous herbal collection it was really important for us to kind of highlight things that we've used for centuries that some people may have forgotten about, such as dandelion. Next slide, please. Dandelion, you often think of they grow on our soccer fields, they grow on the roads, the highways, schools, and we mow them down. But dandelion, and now for the next 2 weeks is a really great time. And then there's a second harvest time later in the summertime. But that I recommend you or children, or if you're an aunt and uncle, just anyone, if that is a great introductory plant medicine for you to use. And if there's, something little that I can share today is, just picking the tops of the dandelions. Next slide, please. Um, and having them, here's the bar, and having them um, just a baking pan and putting it out and letting it dry in the sun and bringing it back in. And once they're fully dried, is putting them in an oil infusion and heating it up consistently. If you're lucky and you have time in the world in your schedule to leave it outside in the natural sunlight and bring it in at night. Depending, of course, on the temperatures. If you're in the Chilliwack area, it gets hot in Kelowna and Kamloops, so you probably could do this for, gosh, a week or two. But of course, if you're in Prince Rupert, if you're in Haida Gwaii, if you're in, Terrace or Vancouver Island, there is a climate changes. So if you live in any of these areas, certainly we recommend more of like the 4 weeks. And all you would do is take that, put it in a cloth, um, and just drain everything. I wish I could show you this today, but maybe we'll give UBC Learning Circle some extra resources to share a video and a step-by-step for how you guys can do this at home. And once the 30 days are up, you can put it in an amber glass bottle. Of course, amber protects kind of sun and making sure that we keep our medicine in cool places. And then you can just use that. That is, if instead of buying lotions from Superstore or Walmart, that can be, just a plant medicine to help your dry skin. And it can be very soothing for itchy skin that happens, post-sun or in the winter. Next slide, please. So as we know, Devil's Club before and Nettle are healing medicines. It's our top medicine. It's our you get hurt and you go to auntie, you go to your grandmother. This is something that's very common in our medicines. My apologies, though, the wrong label is on this bar of soap. This is our nettle bar, but unfortunately it says the seaweed bar. And for us and for me, a story I can share about nettle and Devil's Club is for so long, and I don't know why, for so long I felt like it's really hard to find a teacher to teach you things about these specific medicines. These are the most, I would say, gate, I don't think linguistic and English is not my forte, but I would say that these are the most gate kept medicines in our community. And RavenSong will be producing some videos to be sharing with the Indigenous community on how to harvest, is what to look for when harvesting these medicines, because again, our role, our mission, our values at Bear Essential Oils and RavenSong is not to hide anything, and not to keep anything from our community. And you think about even financial literacy is, sometimes people in our community can't afford to buy these medicines. And so the best way that we can empower them and give love is to show them, is to teach them, and there's no harm in that. And so that's kind of my takeaway that I wanted to really share with you on that. Next slide, please. So this is very exciting. Valerie, the founder of RavenSong, on the bottom right is called Spirit Energy. These, believe it or not, this is not done by a machine. This is hand done in our studio. And so we were fortunate that we are the first Indigenous company in North America to receive international recognition for the spirit energy. And this is our most and Valerie will speak to this if you join her session this Thursday. This is something that, we pride ourselves on, because not only do the scents kind of, the bottom right bar, has some anise in it. So that was kind of created and homage to our stinky commercial fishermen in our families, right? Because anise kind of hides the smell of many things. But this is really to pay respects to, Haida Gwaii and Salish Sea and the territories that we're on, and, White Raven in the top left, and legend stories of Haida Gwaii, and for Valerie to bring that. But, I'll let her speak more to that. But this was really important for me to share that not only are we an Indigenous company that is trying to do as much knowledge transfer within our team, and creating videos that we are going to be working on this fall to publicly share with the community, but that Valerie is a master. When we think of a master carver, and we think of people who excel in beading, and food fishing and language, master language teachers, that she is truly a master of medicine and soap making. And I'm so honored to be her mentee, and my husband and I are so lucky. Yeah, next slide. So this is her next. I just wanted to kind of promote it because I truly think, to understand my passion and my story, that it's so important to really listen to the founder story and how she came to be, and how, identifying as Indigenous, and that a reminder in business, in life, for anyone who's Indigenous on this call, that we walk two paths. And navigating that and learning that is that our ways of being, of knowledge sharing, and really opening those doors of here's the teachings, here's the teachings, and I really want you to learn this, and how can we help you, is very different. I've learned in the last 3 years of being an Indigenous entrepreneur of 3 businesses, I want to say, the number one difference in just understanding non-Indigenous business owners and plant teachers, is that of course we pay our elders, and stuff like that, and our medicine teachers, and but that if someone ever in our community could not afford that, that there is no elder, that there's no auntie that I know of, or sister, or in my circle, that would ever say, you can afford, to pay me, whether it's a young cousin, or that we would ever hide that information. And I think that is the true difference, that I'm finding more and more, and that we hope to to really dispel that, and to really break up that thought process. And that's what's so important about generational knowledge transfer, is that component. That pretty much wraps up my presentation. I hope that everyone was able to, get something out of it. And if you have any questions about plant medicine, if you have any questions about harvesting, please feel free to email. My email is just alissa@ravensongsoap.com, and we are happy to connect with you.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. I loved hearing every bit of it, and just such good energy. And I'm so
Thank
glad that
you.
you guys are still doing really well. And yeah, so we have a few questions here. Our first question is, where can we purchase your soaps and tinctures?
Yeah, so you can purchase everything here in the link. It's ravensongsoap.com. You can also, we are soon going to be having a retailer. Something that I didn't quite get into the presentation is that our founder, Valerie, when she started this, she had soap everywhere, girlfriends. She had soap in her laundry room. She had soap with her jarred fish in her cupboards. And a part of Valerie was offering the best medicine she could and not really worrying about, the packaging look or anything, that it was the highest quality. So we're really excited. We've been working for 7 to 9 months on this project, but over the next couple months, you will see kind of an uplift and a new face to RavenSong to really match just like how amazing these products are that she's, teaching us and also matching the value of that look. Yeah.
Mhm. Wow, that's great. Thank you so much. And then, how did you approach finding your mentor, Valerie?
Yeah, so I am really I'm really lucky. So with Valerie, when I opened West Coast Wildflowers, I actually approached 3 Indigenous women. Um, and I knew immediately in the field, um, you have I just instinctively knew that I need a coach and I need the best coach that I can get. So it started off as me selling Valerie soaps in my store 3 years ago, actually. And ironically enough, I learned, of course, through storytelling that Valerie is related to my husband distantly in Haida Gwaii. And I had not known that at the time. So I'd been working for her for, 3 years. Um, and um, and finally one day I just asked her, and I just was very honest with her. I said, I don't have a lot of medicine teachers. I didn't have a lot of healthy aunties growing up. And that when I came to the urban setting of Vancouver, I met, Avis O'Brien, Adrian Charlie. Like I met just amazing Indigenous women that I didn't have access to as a child. And so I had a really deep desire. To learn and just finally acknowledging I have a right to learn that. And so my recommendation to anyone that's looking for a medicine teacher or looking, to become a carver or anything, is simply just to ask. I think we as Indigenous people we struggle with asking for help. And especially Indigenous women, we are the bearers of everything. We carry so much on our plate. Um, so yeah.
Great. And then our next question is it's from someone that works with UBC, Gearing Up, and they have a group that will be going through Wet'suwet'en territory to put on workshops at a school. Do you have any advice that you can provide to give to Indigenous students to inspire them about plant medicine as a science?
Yeah, so my understanding is we have a group from UBC going to WITSET. That's amazing. Um, I think the best way to connect with our youth, and I was sharing with you guys earlier, right before we started this call, that 18 years ago, with Mary Point, that I was actually an Indigenous student through the UBC Learning Circle. And I had shared, that I was at the second annual Ever Gov, which I think we've celebrated like 25 years this year. So I'm aging myself a little bit, but that is share your stories. That is the most important part. I think that's the most important part that stuck with me. Is finding a way, a story that is relatable, is taking the time to listen and to learn their stories, and to, is there something small that you can take that makes it relatable? Is there an offering that you can, offer these students, whether it's, a medicine bag or something, right? That is like, yeah, Anytime I'm a facilitator for Gov or doing youth workshops, it's like, what can I gift them that is meaningful, that I think that they're going to take away from this and contribute that tiny gift, whether it's, gosh, I'm biased, a bar of soap or something, or a bath bomb, but is taking something so that when they use that, or if it's, something long term, that they have that memory with them of like, oh, I have this, and it associates, it's a positive association for them. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. And then we have another kind of bigger question. As an Indigenous entrepreneur who's really just starting to get organized, I'm wondering what advice you would give yourself if you were just starting out again in regards to letting yourself be seen. Did you struggle with marketing or anything? Did you find strength and purpose in anything besides your culture? And did you or do you still push back from gatekeepers for sharing so freely? It's a loaded
Oh,
question.
cousin or auntie who gave this one. This is a long one. Um, So how I started was I just created a Shopify website. It was in the middle of COVID. The North American Indigenous Games weren't going on, and I truly felt guilty collecting a paycheck and not doing anything for our youth. And a lot of people thought I was crazy, and you will have a lot of people who will think you're crazy, and the people who you think will support you the most may challenge you the most, and that it's the community of the business that you build. Um, Now I'm in year 3, and it's not normal to have, and I will say that very frankly and very freely, that it's not normal to have 3 businesses and you're a third year Indigenous entrepreneur. That means, but one of the biggest things that I'm learning in year 3 that I wish I knew in year 1 is that I've just spent so many times working in the front line of Indigenous communities. And we always had a bookkeeper, we always had an accountant, we always had, someone else to do that job because we're so busy doing the frontline work, that I recommend, and it's something that not just I struggle with, but that financial literacy. And you're talking from someone who, despite failing university stats at SFU 3 times, that I still graduated. And university stats is the one thing that held me from, a bachelor's of criminology to just a bachelor of, not just, but a bachelor of arts with a double minor in criminology and First Nation studies, is that teach your young ones about financial literacy, teach yourself. I recommend, I will type it in the chat here. WeBC, Women's Entrepreneur British Columbia, they have free workshops all the time on financial literacy, whether it's another organization I want to share with it. Unfortunately, this is for women identifying or women in this group, is Corliss. It used to be called SheO. It was founded, and they have so much resources, and Futurepreneur. They have so much research on creating a business plan, creating, whether you're going to NEDC is another. They have a free business booklet to complete, is doing those steps. Because I just did it boldly and bravely, and I followed my gut. But your gut will only take you so far before you need to financially understand your business. You need to be able to read your numbers as if you're reading a novel. I'm very fortunate that after 3 years, WeBC has been able to give me a mentor. She's a former CFO of quite a few high-level companies. So that would be my recommendation, getting a mentor from WeBC, looking at your finances. That is so critical that I'm now catching up in year 3.
Thank you so much.
Oh, wait, there was more to that question.
Oh yeah.
So marketing. So if anyone goes on my Instagram, I'm more famously in the cousin section known for West Coast Wildflowers on Instagram. I say crazy things like, hey Cheetos or holy hot potatoes. And it's just really, I felt like in my late 20s and 30s is really finding myself. I'm a non-drinker, and it took me a long time to try and find like where do I fit in, and just being myself on social media. Um, and I didn't have trouble. But I will say that with a caveat is I've now had to officially hire someone in marketing, because you cannot own three businesses without delegating. And as Indigenous women, I think we really struggle with that because we're so used to doing everything on our own, whether it's raffles, whether it's cooking, whether it's harvesting, whether it's, we are the caretakers of our moms and our aunts. There's so many things. Um, and did you find strength in the purpose, and did you find strength and purpose in anything besides your culture? Yeah. So as I shared, I had a kidney transplant. Unfortunately, my file was lost in the medical system as I was a youth aging out of care. And after I had my kidney transplant, I felt like there was this unhealthy, I do want to say unhealthy sense of urgency to complete things in my life. Whether it was like a national badminton player, whether it was, creating the first ever Indigenous criminology series at SFU, and having people like Dr. Kim Rosso, who did like profiling that led to helping find Robert Pickton. Like there's like this inner fire in me that I feel like, it may be trauma based, and I think we should be open about trauma, and I think we should be open to those conversations, and that, where you are at in your trauma and healing. And for me, I think it was for every non-Indigenous teacher, non-Indigenous parent, that, I was friends with their kids, or non-Indigenous coaches that really, um, really, really told me like it's not possible. And I really wanted to prove them wrong. And of course, I've grown and I've done so many things in my life, more than I could dream of, right? And pivoting along the way. A fun fact about me, I was actually the youngest Aboriginal community liaison officer with Correctional Service of Canada, many years ago. So I've done many careers, and now I think I don't have to prove anything to anyone. And that's the beauty of Bare Essential Oils and RavenSong Soap and Candle. I have nothing left to prove. I'm in it for me. I'm in it for, just practicing the calm, practicing the pause, slowing my life down, being there with my children, trying to find that balance. And it's difficult. We live in such a high, fast-paced world. That another advice I would give to anyone, that's scaling business, is finding a virtual assistant. That we're so lucky to live in a time to be able to access assistance. That my assistant has, she knows everything about my life, the meetings, the bookings. She makes sure, my transplant pills get here on time. My son is getting to his autism appointments, that I am setting meetings up with UBC Learning Circle and being able to even take time for an opportunity like this. And lastly, did you or do you still get pushback from gatekeepers for sharing so freely? Um, yeah. And I think a lot of our knowledge sharers do. And I think the sense of it's all of our medicine is going to be gone if you share it with everyone in our community. But there's so much that we can do. There's so much that's access to us that we can plant, that we're not just taking. And, but I still, I'm very confident in saying I still strongly want to dispel that. And I don't believe in that. And I think, um, yeah, that's something that I just kind of stand my ground and hold truth to. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, that was a big question, but you handled it very well. Um, yeah, so we've got a few more questions here. What would you recommend for someone who might be interested in learning about plant medicines, creating medicine, and especially for our youth? Are there any workshops you would recommend?
Hmm. You know what? I gotta give kudos to my old and I see my former colleague is on this call right now. I gotta have kudos to iSpark. I will put it in the chat. So iSpark has a healthy living team, and of course, a medicine teacher that I admire is Robin Edgar. Um, and is applying to host one of you can host a rethink your drink station, you can host different opportunities with them and learn from them. And I think her department and her as a being, you can book her privately. Her business name is Wild About Plants. um, Biggest recommendation I can give for anyone on that journey.
Great, thank you. And our next question is, can you share more about the National Indigenous Renal Transplant Research Project Bridge? How has this influenced your journey through medicine?
Yeah, so 6 years ago, I flew with a nephrologist, Dr. Jay Gill, from St. Paul's Hospital. He's my doctor that oversees me. And he has been such an incredible friend, ally, doctor. We flew to, I believe it was Quebec, and I did a pitch in front of like I don't know, 14 to 16 doctors. And it was a pitch of why we needed, I can't even remember, it might have been like $500,000 in funding to um, to make sure that our people in rural and remote Indigenous communities have equitable access and the same access to healthcare for renal transplant, kidney transplant, and living or organ donor. And so the project is ongoing. We have done some community engagement sessions. There has been interviews. The chief, I'm so sorry, his name is blanking me right now, but he's with the Union BC Chiefs. He recently had a kidney transplant a couple years ago, and so there's a lot of us, Dr. Kelsey Louie with FNHA Health Authority, that we've all been kind of working on this silently in the background, and it's meant so that hopefully long term, that regionally, that we can have a navigator to help a family who either is in renal failure, that has a member who wants to take, if they're in stage 1 or 2, preventative measures, that they have the ability to reach out to that navigator to navigate the healthcare system, whether it's funding, whether it's questions, whether it's, making sure that they understand their medication, their dietary needs. So that's my involvement. And again, trying to slow down because, you can't do it all. And it's taken me a really, really long time. I've ended up in ICU for the last 2 Decembers. Um, and so this past December is when we finally got me 2 assistants, one assistant to help my assistant because there's just so many moving projects. So yeah, just like everyone else, just like every other mom, trying to find that balance. And sometimes you just need to take a nap for the day.
Definitely. Our next question kind of leads into what you were just sharing. What challenges did you face when balancing life and so many businesses, and how did you ground yourself during those tough times?
Yeah. So there's some things that have really changed in my life. Some of them include, for RavenSong, I work there 3 days a week, and for West Coast, I work there 2 days a week. Um, is that at RavenSong, I'm not there longer than 4 p.m. So that is a rule of thumb so that I'm here for my kids after school. We're very strict about that. We're very strict about, at least 2 times a week that we're taking our kids either swimming or we're going for an outdoor walk. Like we have to do something physical with our kids. And then the third thing to kind of balance it out is time for me. And really grateful that the time for me means baths. I'm so fortunate because I have a bath bomb company, so I get the access of bath bombs. But that my husband has been so wonderful in that. Is that we follow kind of the 5 rule of thumbs for us, and that is time for ourselves, time for each other, time with our kids, time for the business. And then this extra time is fits into like whatever else we need to fit in for the week, whether that's medical appointments or yeah. It's not a
Right.
perfect system, let me tell you, but we try our best. I mean, we can't help it when our kids get hand, foot, and mouth disease. We can't help it when our kids bring home, Lilith's and Lucifer's new disease from school, but we certainly do try our best.
Definitely. That's very great. And then, are there any land-based teachings that youth or adults can sign up for to learn about plant medicine?
Yeah, so for this one, I mean, I only know kind of what happens, in the Campbell River area. But I would check in with like any of your community's wellness coordinators, right? Your elders groups. Um, I also would recommend reaching out to iSpark that I had mentioned, and approaching them about, is there something that we can host that's non-sports related in that healthy living department? Um, and then, honestly, a really great way to find out more information is hashtags. Hashtags is such a great way, whether you're on Instagram or Facebook and you search up a specific hashtag, whether it's you hashtag plant harvesting or you're hashtagging nettle or devil's club, it'll lead you. It's a little bit of a rabbit hole, but trust me, it's really worth it. It will lead you down this rabbit hole of finding people that you didn't know existed. And finally, if you get the opportunity to volunteer or help at the BC Elders Gathering, that is like an excellent way to find teachers and knowledge keepers and learning about plant medicine. Yeah.
Cool. And then our last question is, what is one take-home message that you would like to give your younger self if you could go back to tell yourself?
Mm, girl, there's so much. There's so much. I had a very interesting upbringing. I moved around a lot, put in very, uncomfortable situations. But I wish I could have been kinder to myself. And I mean kinder to the words that we speak to ourselves on a daily basis. I still remind that to myself. Or an example, a really great example that I see often in my boutique, and that, that I catch, cousins or stuff saying is, I feel so fat or I'm fat is don't talk to your body like that. Don't talk to yourself like that. Is I my message is I wish I could have been kinder to myself and my thoughts. And that leads into a whole new session of mental health. And I think that's something that I have been more confident talking about, because I think people on social media, it's not all real, right? What we see to our kids is not that picture perfect of, oh my gosh, Allie owns 3 businesses and she was the youngest in this and she accomplished this, but it doesn't come without trial and tribulations. It doesn't come out with certainly some mental health, and anxiety and seasonal depression, and that yeah, is asking for help and speaking kinder to yourself.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I
thank you for having me.
Yeah, we are so happy to have you on the Learning Circle. And I know all our guests are really fortunate and grateful for you sharing your story with uh, Bare Essential Oils and then also RavenSong Soap and Candle. And you're just doing an amazing job and very inspiring and such good energy. And we're really
Thank
happy that we had you on. And yeah. Do you have any last words to share with anyone?
I think that I just wish you all well today. And that I hope you spend at least 10 minutes to go outside today to clear your mind, even take the next 10 minutes after this session to really go outside and I hope that that 10 minutes you take time to reflect on what was something that you grabbed from this presentation. What was something that like really resonated with you? What is something that, you can pass on to someone else as a teaching? So, Tabu Masai, Hawa, Gaelikesla for having me.
Thank you. And thank you to all our guests for joining us today. And thank you, Ali, for the amazing discussion. It was great to learn about your businesses and your story and how you continue to inspire a lot of people and Indigenous people out there. And yeah, so just before we end the webinar, we'd love to bring your attention to our upcoming webinars. We have Valerie on Thursday for transfer and mentorship. And then we have Wills and Estates for Indigenous People Part 1. And then we have Wills and Estates for Indigenous People Part 2. And then we have Healing Inner Voices. All of our webinars are free to sign up for on our website. So at www.learningscircle.ubc.ca. And please sign up for our newsletter. The link will be in the chat. And thank you everyone for joining us today. We look forward to seeing everyone at our next one. I'm lived.